Welcome back, Lieutenant Kristin Daley. Today is February 27th. It's been a while since we've spoken to you for Belmont Briefing, but we would like to go over some interesting facts that you might share with us.
Okay, thank you, Tommy, for having me. So unfortunately, one of the things that we're still seeing, and many towns are seeing, is that people's mail is still being stolen from mailboxes. Most recently, we had the mailboxes in the area of Trapello and Beach Street, where residents had put mail, they delivered their bills, some checks that they had written were stolen, and what they were called, they were washed. Washed means that and some kind of chemicals are used to take the ink off of the check and they rewrite them. And these checks that were made out for maybe $150 instead are being made out to someone for $15,000, and the people attempt to cash them. The best thing that you can do, we say to people, if you can pay your bills online, great. If you have to put bills in the mail, try to do it at the actual post office, inside the post office. If you cannot get to the post office during their business hours, do your mail, send it during the week, in the morning, so that it'll be picked up that day. What we've seen with the most recent incident is that these bills were put in over the weekend on maybe a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, and obviously these people are stealing it from the mailboxes during the overnight. And how they're doing it, unfortunately, if people remember seeing a few months ago, mail carriers were getting robbed at gunpoint, many of them, and what they were taking from them was the key that they can open up every single mailbox that these postal carriers use. So that's what they're doing. So even if it is a mailbox that has been adjusted so that you can't really stick anything down there to take something out, unfortunately, these thieves now actually have the key to just open up the mailbox, and they're doing it overnight. They're driving up, it's very quick to do. So if you have to put your letters in the mail, do it in the morning. Do it at a post office that has a lot of activity in front of it, but do in the morning during the week when it will be picked up at their time, like 11 or 12 o'clock, whatever time the post office picks up during the day.
You mentioned, I believe you mentioned all the pieces, the fact that the keys are critical to this and they're being stolen.
Yes, and in the beginning when this was happening, they were using things to fish in the mailboxes. They were sticking things down and pulling out the pieces of mail. And so the post office started changing some of their mailboxes so it's not the kind that you pull down. It just has a little slot that you can go through. So that's when the thieves started actually, unfortunately, robbing these mail carriers, most of them at gunpoint, to actually take the key. So now they can just open up the door with that key and just take all the mail out. So please, if you can, just put it right in the post office mailbox, walk into the post office, put it in their mailboxes there. If not, do it during the week, in the morning, before the daily pickup, so you know it'll be picked up that day.
No weekends.
No, do not put any mail in a mailbox on the weekends. Don't do it.
Okay. Thank you for that advice, Kristin. We also wanted to talk about some other fraud scams that you've identified.
Yes, unfortunately, fraud is still out there, and we've seen a few. One of the things we've seen is people getting phone calls from people claiming to be from the U.S. Marshal's office, stating that they have intercepted a package delivered to the victim that's addressed to the victim, and it contains drugs. So then they accuse the victim of being a drug dealer. Then they claim that they did some more research and the victim has several bank accounts at different banks all around in their name. And then they accuse the victim of money laundering, which again brings fear. And they claim that some marshals are going to be coming to their house and they're going to question them. And if they don't like their answers, they're going to arrest them. So this last victim, unfortunately, was advised to take $13,000 and go to one of those cryptocurrency/Bitcoin ATMs and send the money to another account via the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. No legitimate law enforcement agency would ever take any kind of cryptocurrency or gift cards or any other form of payment to fix a case or to pay a fine. No legitimate law enforcement agency who's actually doing a real drug smuggling investigation would just call someone to say, we found a package with drugs in it addressed to you. No legitimate law enforcement agency would ever take any form of payment over the phone. Anything, any fine. You have to pay that in person, and you actually have to use real money. Even if you wanted to pay a parking ticket, you have to either mail it in or you have to go in person. So they use fear. We ask anyone, if you get a call like this, please call the Belmont Police Department right away. Hang up the phone with them and call us, and we can confirm for you that that is not true. But no U.S. Marshal, no government entity is going to call someone that they believe is part of a drug smuggling ring. They're not going to call them and let them know that they're investigating them. That is not the way it works. But unfortunately, these scammers use fear. They use fear to frighten people and say they're going to be arrested. They'll even go to police departments' websites and get police officers' names over, on the website, and they use those officers' names. These people are very tricky. This is their 40-hour work week. This is what they do. They know what to say to people. And it's people of all ages that we've seen fall victim to these types of scams.
Now, Kristin, you said you're going to be at the Senior Center on Beach Street on March 10th.
Yes, at
1:15
p.m. I'll be giving a presentation talking about all the different scams that come over the phone, scams where people get texts saying there's something wrong with their account, or emails, and also the in-person scams. Unfortunately, we do have some victims of a contractor who claimed went to their home to solicit business, took money from them, and sometimes they did a little bit of the work and left, or he didn't do any of the work. I mean, we do have an active case going on, so we can't talk much about it, but what I can say is never trust a contractor who just shows up at your door and says, offers to do work for you. Those are not legitimate, licensed, or insured contractors. Never sign anything with them. Never do anything with someone who just shows up at your door.
And then we'd like to talk a little bit about what the police department is seeing post-COVID. We talked a little bit about how many of the residents felt isolated. And from that, the police department got a recent grant for a social worker or a counselor.
It's a clinician. We got a grant for a clinician who does respond with our officers to any kind of mental health crisis and other calls, who is there to help people. And she is wonderful. She works with people to work through their crisis, and if they need help, we can get them to the to the hospital. So yes, we do have a clinician. She is full-time, that she's in the cruisers with the officers helping respond to calls. And she can also help families if they need, even if they have a family member who's in a crisis, but they don't know what to do, she's more than happy to talk to family members and give them referrals and give them advice on what they can do, where they can go for a family.
And there will be you will follow up and send Belmont Briefing some resources that we can then post?
Yep, phone numbers that people can call when they're in a crisis or looking for help. So yes, I will send that to you, and you can post that.
And on the weekends, you had mentioned that on the weekends when the clinician might not be working, we'll probably get that in the resources, but you said advocacy?
Advocates is our emergency psychiatric services, and we can call them, and clinicians can come out and respond when we're having, if someone's having a crisis. They've also been able to do telehealth with people. If someone's having a crisis and they need someone to talk to, they've been able to also do telehealth. So yes, they've always been our emergency psychiatric services. We've used them many times to help people in need, especially during COVID when people were isolated and just needed someone to talk to. So yes, that advocates will be on the list.
Thank you, Kristin. This has been so informative.
I just want to ask one question about that. Let's say a parent has a child who's in crisis. When the parent calls the police for help, do they say, we would like you to bring along a clinician? How do the parents know to do that?
If our clinician is working,
Yes.
if our clinician is working, she automatically goes to those calls. No, that's what she does.
Okay.
The minute she hears mental health, and That's exactly what she does. She automatically goes to any of those calls, and not even just mental health calls. She has responded to when we've had medicals to maybe help the family members of someone who was sick, or even when there's been car accidents. She has been able to there to help people if people are upset about the car accident. So she goes to everything. She's in with an officer, driving around with an officer. So she automatically responds.
Thank you.
Well, this might be a chief question, but at what point might you need another clinician, and how will you gauge that? Because it sounds like there's a lot going
And
on.
how can we support you in obtaining that? Are there things we can do as the
So ours is through a grant. I mean, we do have monthly meetings and we go over all the stats. And we have monthly meetings again with the chief and with the supervisors of the clinician and everything. And it's something that has to be evaluated. You have to, give it time. We have to usually, it's about a year or so, and then you can make that decision. But we do have monthly meetings going over all their stats, going over all our cases with not just our clinician, but with her supervising clinicians, with several of her supervisors and several of our supervisors. So this is something that we're keeping tabs on, and we're keeping an eye on all our stats and our cases.
Well, the one thing that concerns me is that it's a grant. It sounds to me like it needs to be permanent, but that would be the police department's decision. But certainly it should be brought up at town meeting or in budget discussions, rather than...
Yeah, that's more of a question for the chief. But as I said,
Right.
this is something we're evaluating and would definitely, like to, we love our clinician. We think she's wonderful. All the officers appreciate having her on scene, responding to calls. As I said, and it's not even just the mental health crisis. They've been wonderful when we've had medicals, when we've had car accidents, especially if young people are involved. So, she's a very wonderful asset to our department.
So glad you got a great person to fill that role. Thank you, Kristin, and hope to see you soon. Thank you for spending time with us this morning.